Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Aaron Landon, head men's basketball coach at St. Martin's University. Coach, thanks for being here today. Excited to talk.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of this podcast, and quite a few guys that I really admire have been on, and I've enjoyed that.
Well, excited to add you to the list. So why don't you take us through your background as a coach? How'd you end up in the profession? What was it like getting your first job, getting asked to leave your first job, and any subsequent jobs you've had along the way?
I haven't been fired yet. I'm sure that day is going to come. They say you're not really coaching until you've been fired. So yeah, my senior year in college, I had sort of an anxiety attack about letting go of basketball. And it wasn't because I was some great player. I just wasn't ready to be done with it. And a lot of guys were able to, work a job and not make much money after college or just go travel. And so I thought the best thing for me would be just being involved in basketball for 1 year. So I think, our season ends March within 3 to 4 weeks. So late March or early April, I was visiting with a friend at an event at Cal State Dominguez Hills, an AAU event, and met Jesse Teplitsky on the baseline. He had just gotten hired to be the head coach at Santa Monica College. He was kind enough to let me join his staff. He was the perfect head coach for me to start with. He did an unbelievable job. He flipped the program in a year, something I've never been able to do. Like, took a program that had won, I think, 9 games and got him back into the state tournament. He had so much success that he got a full-time head coaching position at Cerritos College and left. So after a year, I was able to join a close childhood friend of mine who had gotten a job in your neck of the woods at Marina High School. He was the athletic director, the head boys basketball coach. He was teaching high school history. And I had all these big plans. So he was able to help me actually get a real job where I was making no money at Santa Monica. I didn't have health insurance, and he helped me take care of a couple of those essential things. I got a job at Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. It was my first real job post-college. I coached with him for 3 years. That small high school job probably prepared me more for the head coaching jobs I've had than the other college experience I had leading up to it. I was there with him for 3 years. I got a graduate assistant job after that at Concordia University in Portland. Was dying to get back into college basketball. At Concordia Portland, those were probably the 2 most important and happiest years of my life on and off the floor, culminating in a 3-month flurry of getting engaged, earning a master's degree, and getting my first head coaching job at 30 years old. So I got my first head coaching job at South Puget Sound Community College, member of the NWAC, small JC on the state of Washington. They only had 4 sports in the athletic department at the time. A lot of basketball guys like to rate jobs. They tell me, hey, that's not a good job, or that's a tough job. And I just think a lot of those guys were not aware that I had no job. So every job when you're unemployed is a great job. And that's what my situation was. I took that job and I put an awful product on the floor and had to learn some hard lessons, and eventually just, had really special people come through the program, and just had a pretty incredible run and was there for 6 years. And then on my 37th birthday, I interviewed and got hired here at St. Martin's on the same day. And so that was May 17th, 2019. I really started working in June. I had to get through the NCAA certifications and stuff. So started a little bit later than some jobs start when guys get hired in the spring. But it was fine. We were terrible. We were 6-23. In March, we had to send everybody home because of COVID. And through some luck and a lot of patience, we were able to kind of get this thing rolling. And that's what brings us to today. I could talk on each of those jobs for hours. So that's about as short as I can do it.
No, that's great. And it gives me an opportunity to kind of slide into the question I usually ask as I design this show, let's call it, to be a digital database of mentorship for young coaches and or people leaving jobs, and for old experienced coaches, like just trying to rethink things. And I always ask, what are the things you need to figure out when you took over as a head coach? And you made a comment that you learned more at Marina about being a head coach than at some of these other stops as an assistant at the college level. I would love to know, both at your previous stop and now at St. Martin's, what are the things that you realized very quickly you needed to figure out, even though you felt prepared?
Well, at both of those jobs, and I think most small colleges are similar, it's mainly off the court stuff, and I always call it the infrastructure of a program. I went to work for a guy that is, essentially like my best friend, and so I had a great deal of trust and a previously established relationship, and now he's got to listen to this podcast, because those years he was trying to run a high school program like a college program, but it was a brand new high school, so it probably needed and deserved that level of attention and detail that he wanted to get into. So we were both in our 20s with, no wives and no kids yet. And we would just hang around our apartment at night and try to figure out all these little components that would be important to grow a program. So things like, fundraising and getting our funding off the ground, because we wanted to do special things. We wanted to take our team to Cal or Stanford for team camp. And how is that going to cost? And hey, if we can do that, that's going to, help more players want to come to Marina and join a special experience and this and that. But it was just everything. We didn't have a gym. So just like all the logistics and everything, hey, we want to go to this tournament. This is how we got to incorporate parents. This is how we're going to order uniforms. This is how we're going to cover the rest of the gear. Like I said, the gym time, this is how you schedule. This is how the CCS works. This is how playoff seating works. He was really ambitious about wanting to get out of the Division 5 league they were in and wanted to join the MTAL. And so it was, studying the MTAL, and just the amount of time that it takes to put together kind of a comprehensive program that has all bases covered, strength and conditioning, off-season stuff. It just takes so much time at the high school level. That's a lot like the first job I had as a junior college head coach, where different, but same sort of stuff. Like, we need to get extra funding in the pockets of our guys that are coming in from out of the state. So here's how you write a job description for federal work study. And here's how you take that through a financial aid office. And I was an academic advisor at the time, and balancing, faculty, academic advising, and coaching. So I thought the piece that really applied is, here's how you dig in and establish relationships on campus. Here's how you prioritize stuff. I could go on and on. It had nothing to do with coaching. There's no amount of being an assistant that I think can truly get you ready to be a head coach. But if you're buttoned up off the floor, that can, in my case, that can mask some deficiencies and cover up some flaws and buy you some time to figure out the on-floor coaching.
No doubt. And I want to push into that a little bit more and use your last two stops as an example for the listeners. What are some things that, as you transition to St. Martin's, that were working in this off-court infrastructure at the junior college that doesn't work there? And what are some things that you had to realize at St. Martin's, like, oh, this is a new dilemma that I have to try to manage, because you can't solve it?
That's a great question. And I'll give you sort of the positive side first. And all the JC coaches that listen to this will appreciate the gratitude that I had for student housing, offering a housing application as the means to get into an on-campus apartment or a dorm. So anything that we took on, so as a staff, for example, at St. Martin's, you book all of your own travel. You book the airline tickets, you do all the hotels, all that stuff. Those logistics are managed in-house in the men's basketball program at at South Puget Sound, at least, and I don't know how, if, other junior colleges work like this. Your assistant athletic director, somebody in the athletic department is going to help you manage your budget. They're going to help you manage what you can and can't do with scheduling. You have more autonomy here as a program to decide what you can do, if you can afford it, and then how to set all that up, find the best deals. And that's where, a lot of that is about having a great staff in place. But there's some other things, and the first one, and really the most important thing, is housing. Like, I just cannot tell you how many nights I would stay up stressed out trying to figure out how we were going to get somebody who was moving in from out of the state, or moving, from a low income background where they can't drop a ridiculous deposit on an apartment. Figuring that stuff out was the most challenging piece of being a JC head coach. And I do know a lot of JC coaches will publicly say, I don't do that stuff for my guys. I don't get my hands involved. There's gray area. I don't touch it. That's just not the way I do things. And that's true until a really, really good player comes into the gym, and then I would happily call any of those guys liars. Like, you'll look for some apartments if that guy's good enough. Give me a break. So we were fortunate to have great players that required my attention on housing and apartments, and fortunately we were able to get out of there alive and never get into much trouble with that side of things.
And as you have solve that dilemma, what are some other ones that you're still working on at St. Martin's that have nothing to do with between the lines? I talked to Rich about this, where I always just try to put a percentage on it. It's like, I want to be the head coach. It's like, cool. How much do you like basketball, and how much do you like logistical concerns? Because 85% of your time has nothing to do with basketball. What are some of the things you're still trying to figure out? Or even better, what are some creative solutions you found to problems in your time there?
The biggest area that I have to continue to grow in is fundraising. It requires a completely different level of alumni and booster engagement and fundraising here. One of the solutions, we didn't invent this, there was already camps in place, but growing our camps has created a revenue stream that we really rely on. I think me and my staff, and I think a lot of coaches are more comfortable with sort of the sweat equity fundraising of running a camp, because we're all guys that want to be in the gym. But that other side of, how do you engage boosters? How do you engage alumni? How do you engage, alumni differently? If it's somebody that's retired and it's somebody that graduated 5 years ago, how do you make this special for both of them? People with different, socioeconomic situations that they're in. How do you make them feel valued? It's not all about money. That's a area that I know I have to continue to grow in. And that's a really, really big part, not just at St. Martin's, but I think a lot of small colleges, that's a big part of the job. And that's a part of the job that I probably underestimated coming in.
Yeah, that's always a dilemma that I think faces you at any level you're at, depending on the scope of the program that you want to run. And how do you figure out a way to hack that? And when we were in Sacramento at El Camino, and you got all these team camps and whatnot, I started looking at the numbers, and I was like, why am I going to pay $3,000 to go here when I can just bring everybody to me, play for free, and get more games? And so we had like the summer circuit humming at our place just to solve that challenge. But it's unique to every situation. I can't do that here because there's not as many teams. But you got to kind of figure that one out. And I love that as an example there. What would you say, and this is actually good because you've been in a few places now, is the best thing you do in your program that has the largest ripple effect on culture, that were you to go, you would take with you? So what did you bring with you from South Puget Sound? What are you doing right now that will continue with you wherever you leave? And I'm always curious about this. And sometimes it's a tangible, right? Hey, we do this and it's super unique. And I'm doing it if I'm coaching, middle school tennis, I'm doing this. Like, if not, sometimes it's unique to the sport. But I'm always just curious, what are some things that you can share that people may be able to borrow that have had a transformational effect on what you're building?
So yeah, it's a really good question, and I've heard you ask it before on the pod. This is my first podcast ever, so I will say during the pandemic, I listened to every podcast I could find with all those open days, and still, it's like my favorite thing to do is just do the yard work and get lost in a pod. I say that because I thought, especially during the pandemic, I've listened to a lot of guys huff and puff about their culture, and some of those guys got themselves into a little bit of trouble coming out of the pandemic. I never want to be self-righteous about what we do. I think that's a big turnoff. I think we're all more vulnerable than we want to admit. With that, I would say the most special thing that I think impacts our culture is right now, the staff that we have. I'm in a really special place, and I know it won't last long, but I have a really special relationship with my assistant. He's a guy that coached with me at the JC level. He's a guy that's like grown up in front of my eyes. I was the primary recruiter on him when he was coming out played at Cabrillo, just up the road from you guys, and then had a really special career at Concordia. And just to have him on my side, I think we have a really unique coaching chemistry that a lot of other coaches would say, hey, that's really weird the way that you guys do stuff. But I think that is the best thing in our program, because it sets the tone for how our players need to bounce and accept, this guy does this better. I'm going to let him play to his strengths. I'm going to strengthen him in the areas he's already great. I'm going to make up for his deficiencies, and that's part of my role. And it's not always like that. It hasn't been that way for me, but with us right now, I recognize how special that is. I think our players feed off of it. I can see it in the love that they have for him and my other assistant. And so knowing that I won't have it forever, if it was ever, at another place or down the road, I just hope that I can continue to kind of strengthen relationships with guys that I've known for a while. I think that's always a good foundation. And we don't do anything magical here, but I think that relationship and letting the guys see it every single day and how unique it is, I think that's probably the most special thing in our program, that we can provide the players. And then I think they give that back to us, and we just sort of feed off of each other.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I've had a similar experience the last couple of years that has allowed me to do some things I haven't been able to do before, with Tyler being here. And you're right. There's a trickle down effect to that, and figuring out how to build cohesive staffs and hopefully sustainable ones, which is hard at the level you're at, and hard at the high school level, and hard at any level, because people are trying to go get different jobs and whatnot. But I love the fact that you've figured that one out for the time being. All right, let me do this. As a junior college coach and as a smaller school coach, what I've observed is that seems to be more of a cohesiveness amongst the coaches on that campus, meaning it's a smaller department. You see them all over the place. Your office is probably right next door instead of in your special practice facility. And so along those lines, I always want to know what you've learned watching other sports, watching other teams, sitting in the office with the soccer coach, that you've been able to steal and bring to your approach to basketball.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think the overall larger answer for me, and I got to really check things out. There was a year we were in between athletic directors, and we were right in the middle of the year. I was also a junior college athletic director on an interim basis for a year. So I really got to learn a lot about how other sports work, just in the context of the league and bylaws and codes and all that. And just the exposure to other coaches was awesome. I think that the thing I've learned most is that when I was young, I thought that there would be some like master class in how to coach and prepare from these guys that I would look up to in my sport. And that the rest of us are trying to figure out the lessons that they've learned and they probably don't want to pass down. The more I've learned about other sports, and honestly, a lot of other, men's basketball programs that we get to watch, is that it's like apples and oranges place to place. And there's just so many different ways to do it. And something that I might think is dumb or silly, that can work for somebody simply because their personality is different. And I think that's sort of like the beauty of coaching, is a different type of personality is going to do things in a different way. And that can work for a different type of player. Which is then, tied to recruiting. Who do you align with from just a personality standpoint, chemistry standpoint, what coaching style fits, how they do things, how they operate. Things can vary so much. And I always thought it was crazy how much coaches would judge each other. That guy does this, or that guy just rolls the balls out. That's like, that was a disrespectful thing. That's probably something that a lot of coaches would say about us, or about me. All he does is he just lets that little point guard at St. Martin's rock out and ball screens, and then everything else, they're not running. There's different criticisms that I think each style could, hold against another style, but hey, that's just that person's personality. So the diversity and what methods are out there, I've been blown away by that. When I was young, I would just watch a DVD and take notes on it and put it in a file and say, that guy's got it figured out. That wouldn't work for another great coach. And I really think that's the coolest part about coaching, but really didn't have a good grasp on that until probably the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, as you mentioned, being able to watch as the interim AD and see how sports work, I've always thought it's pretty eye-opening of how you try to transfer, not necessarily skill stuff, but even just approach to coaching, approach to management, organization. Oh, why don't you do this? Well, because you're not allowed to do that in this sport. Oh, fascinating. I wonder where there's area to move the needle in our own sport. What would you say in the last 10 years? You mentioned you didn't really figure it out till then. So how would you say your approach to coaching has changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a bunch of on-court stuff, and I think that everybody goes through that league to league or year to year. Like, from a style standpoint, we've changed pretty dramatically from what worked at the JC level to what works in Division II. But I would say, like, bigger picture, and more importantly, probably my curiosity about the emotional component of, like, not just coaching guys, but their experience, and wanting to know more about that and wanting to sort through that more. I think every year that I've been a head coach, I've had more curiosity about that year by year than maybe I anticipated. And I do really think, man, there's so much to learn. There's so much you got to get better at. But I also feel like, hey, you got time for that. Like, I've just turned 41. Like, hopefully I can coach, a little bit longer. I think games, right? Reps, that's what does all that. But I think, like, the most urgent thing as a head coach for me here is that emotional side. How are these guys viewing each other? Like, what experiences do they value as a program? For me, I love playing on the road, and home, fans up here would probably hate to hear that, but I like playing on the road more than at home. What do players think about that? What's their experience like with that? What do they value the most? And guys are different. So then, like, figuring out all that stuff when you're trying to manage all those guys, as a head coach, I felt like that stuff, and then me managing the environment, needs to take priority over, hey, I've learned a lot about this system, or we're going to do this stuff. Or, I've changed out, I think people that know me would say that's crazy how much, he ran exclusively zone defense for 6 years, never played any man-to-man defense as a JC coach, and now they're totally different. That stuff is small, I think, compared to that other side, and how much I've sort of changed just as much as, like, what I'm invested in has kind of, I don't want to say it's gone away from basketball, but the ratios changed than when I came in. And ratio when I came in was probably like 8-2, 9-1 on-court stuff to their emotional experience.
Yes. And I think as a regular listener, you've probably heard that throughout this, that the relationship piece is king. And I think many of us, as we get older, not everyone, but make that shift. And I'm in the same boat you are. It's about 2% of the time, or 2 out of 10, I spend thinking about the game of basketball, and 80% of the time I'm thinking about, hey, how are we getting these people to grow as adults or into adults, and to learn to lead and follow and be part of something bigger than themselves, and how can we use athletics as a vehicle to do that. And it sounds like you're in that sweet spot of the transition, so that's awesome.
I will say, sorry, because again, I don't want to be self-righteous, and I want to be honest. I've had some terrible relationships here and some really bad ones at South Puget Sound. And as a head coach, that's been some of the stuff that I've reflected on the most, is where did that relationship fail? And I've had some challenges from a relationship standpoint, as much as I could point to different successes and say, I'm going to that guy's wedding in a week, or this or that, or that guy loves me. And, we tell each other that. I've had, it's modern basketball. I've had guys leave the program. We've had, that stuff has been part of this journey as well. That's stuff for me, because I've told you, like, that's really been what's changed, is more and more attention and awareness of that stuff. That's made it more difficult when I'm going through that with another person. And that stuff is really, really hard. And there's been a lot of that too. So we have not figured it out, but it is where our attention is at more and more.
Good. Well, since you brought that up, do you have a favorite failure or a story that has been transformational in your growth, where you point to it all the time? Like, shit, man, until this moment, like, this was a transformational turning point.
I mean, I just listened to the one that you did with Rob, and I love that guy. He said something like, I don't think losses are failure. But I'll also point out that Rob's never gone 2-22, which is my first year as a head coach, the junior college level. We went 2-22. My second year, we went 7-20. And I can tell you, that's one of the things I am certain about, is there is a huge gap between that 2-22, 20 loss seasons, to somebody that's been winning ball games. That probably sounds like it's not that different. That was night and day, from a talent standpoint, from an ability standpoint, from a team standpoint. I think my dad was the only one that told me, he said, you're one of the only coaches in the country that tripled your wins. When I get to 7 wins, that's probably the most painful year as a coach, because if you look at those box scores, we've lost a lot of close games. And I mean, we lost a lot of games, period. But I had a 7-20 team. And I gave myself a pass on the failure when I was 2-22. We finished the season with 7 players on our active roster. And I thought, my players just aren't good enough. And I gave myself a pass. The next year, we had really good athletes. We had deficiencies. We didn't shoot the ball well. There's, plenty of stuff I could talk about, but there was nowhere to hide. After that, I had lost games when, we're down 4 with 3 minutes left and we lose the game by 12. We're up 6 with 4 minutes left and we got their best player in foul trouble, and, we can't finish that game. That's probably the toughest summer for me, realizing, man, you are not very good at this. And so I just remember that time well. There was just a lot of self-reflection and reality about, man, you can't blame those players for that year. Like, you get into those situations, not like you can X and O your way to a win in the last couple minutes, but as far as how you run a program, are the guys prepared? Everything collectively that I was doing probably lost that team a good 7 games that they could have won. And that's when self-reflection really became important on where I was at, and kind of evaluating and picking myself apart. I failed that team and should have been better. And we took a huge jump the next year. And I think a lot of it was because I, was able to face reality instead of hiding from it.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes those moments allow us to see the reality of the space and challenge us to do some reflection, which doesn't lead me per se to the other thing I usually ask, which is what is something you've most recently changed your mind on, but the type of reflection that you did that summer, right, made you, hey, I used to be over here on this and now I'm over here and here's why. What's something recent? It doesn't even have to be about basketball. I just like to see where this question goes.
Yeah, so that there's a bunch of stuff on the court that people would probably say has changed.
Well, think about it for a minute. I'm going to go a different direction. You plant that in the back of your mind.
I got one that's small, but you'll appreciate this. I mean, this is something that I was really stubborn on until like 2 years ago.
Okay.
I was like pretty old school when it comes to, if you're indoors, you take your hat off, your hood off, your AirPods out, everything is out. And I don't care if we're in an airport, we're still indoors, right? Well, take your hat off, take your hood off. That's disrespectful. And I had to sort of take a step back and realize, hey man, like when you're traveling through an airport, you got your AirPods and your hood on, and I'm taking a nap. Like, once I get to the gate, if I got enough time, I'll lay on the floor and pull my hood over my face and this and that. I've just like stripped that down. Like, it's too much. I've asked guys, if we are at a team meal and you're ordering from a waitress, you need to have your AirPods out. Outside of that, we're not at West Point. And we're not in Annapolis, and it's also not 1965. I think it's okay sometimes for a guy to have a hat on indoors. I've seen professors teaching with hats on, and I have a hat on right now and I'm indoors, so I'm not going to be a complete fraud. And that's something small, but that's like, those little things matter, and they matter to players.
No doubt. And I think the takeaway I would have with that is, what's the hill you're going to die on? You only have so many of them. And as a guy that works in a boarding school, and we have residential life, and we're running dorms, and we're parenting 300 kids, and it's like, do you really want to campus that kid because they left a gum wrapper in the garbage can? Or do you want to like ask them to empty it? Like, it's not that hard, right? It's what's the hill you're going to die on in your program? You can't fight all the battles. Pick Absolutely. The ones that really matter. Yeah. Love it. All right. I got some new stuff I'm playing with. So I'm going to give you two that are complimentary questions. What is an insult that you have received that you are proud of? That would be one. What's an insult you have received that you're proud of? And what's the best compliment you've ever received? So you can do those in tandem, or maybe just pick one.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I sort of like teased it a little bit. The one that we talk about the most is I think sometimes quietly I've heard through the grapevine, not directly, that you guys don't run so much stuff. Like, and in junior college, we sort of, I didn't know anything, and I was imitating other guys. So my first year as a JC coach, we just built out a dribble drive offense off of a Vance Wahlberg DVD set, and I was just imitating Vance, and which is its own separate issue, just trying to imitate somebody else. But in that sort of offense, you're not running sets, you're really just letting guys play, and there's a premium on spacing and when to kick, who to pass to. Here we've gone and we've run stuff, but we've run a bunch of stuff out of ball screens. We've got one of the best point guards in the country, and we've had an elite shooting team. So you shoot too many threes and you guys don't run stuff. You just tangle up your, point guard in a ball screen, and you guys just chuck the first three that's open. And got incredible shooters. And so that's also become a compliment. And I want that word out on the street in recruiting. So you guys love to shoot threes and just rock in a ball screen. Well, Ask around. We ain't going to slow you down and run a bunch of box sets. We're just going to let you go. And if you're open from three, just chuck it up. That's how we time our offensive rebounds the best. We just like that. Shoot a three before you turn it over. Yeah, all that's true. The rumors are true. We don't run stuff. We're bad at coaching. We just have to let our guys play off the leash. And so I think there sort of is a compliment in there. I do think our players have fun. On the defensive end, we spend a lot of time, probably talking and coaching, but we play really fast. We shoot way too many threes. All that's true.
That's great.
I don't know. The best compliment is, it's simple, but like the best compliment that can come, I think, from anybody is like, just if you love somebody and they tell you, I'm really proud of you. Like that is, you can't beat that. There's probably specific compliments that are great, but getting that from a coach that I worked under or a friend or my parents, right? Like there's just, I don't know, man. I can get, in I think 30 years, I'll still be wanting to hear I'm proud of you from my mom and dad. That's like it doesn't get much better than that. So
yeah, love that. Okay, let me wrap with one more. What would you say is a common myth or misconception about your job and or the level that you're at, right? Because with the transfer portal, the ground has shifted underneath everyone. And it seems like in my conversations that your level seems to potentially be taking the most shrapnel in regards to people just cherry picking, not necessarily at your school, but
oh yeah, no,
in regards to, oh, wow, you're really giving people the business there. Here, let me give you a Power 5, ride, whatever. But I'm just curious in general, what do you think is the biggest misconception that people think about your job and what you do at the college level versus the reality?
Two sides of that. I mean, the biggest misconception about my job is that I'm in the office right now, like getting ready to coach my team and prepare for the season. I'm getting ready to run a camp for 175 kids. I'm going to check in with every single member of my camp coaching staff today, make sure that they're set, make sure that they bring their I-9 documents for HR and do all that stuff. Like there's just not all that much basketball that, compared to what people think. Different for me, and maybe some of this is my age or my background, but I think the biggest misconception like about modern basketball is that that it sucks right now, or that like all of this is bad. And I get that side of it. I'll tell you when I was coaching junior college, I would watch Division II games. I grew up, watching the program that you were a part of, UC Davis. Like that's what I talked about when I came and interviewed, was my transformational experience, being exposed to that as a kid, and that at the junior college level, we never could have a system that was established that we could recruit to. And this is our kind of guy. And, our kind of guy fits us this and that. And we had a profile of a type of kid that we can get, that's all the stuff you could do at the 4-year level, redshirt guys and get these 5th-year guys, get them older, like develop them in-house for 4 years, play upperclassmen. That ship had pretty much sailed by the time I got this job. There's a few special programs that can still do that, and I'm seeing them still do that. Like I think Chico State is the primary example. Klink is able to hold on to that. He's able to keep his talented freshmen. Nobody in our league can really do that right now. If you're freshman of the year, that's like a running joke, and the clock's just ticking on when you're out. The transfer portal and all that stuff. It's this and that, and it's bad. There's another side to that, and that's the side that I appreciate. There's a lot of really special stuff going on in college basketball right now. I think athletes have been empowered, which isn't always a great thing, but it's a great thing to enhance it. Like it's a great thing to listen to them more. And that I think took on or really jumped a whole nother level during the pandemic, when there was nothing to do except listen and be on these Zoom calls. And so I think that's been good. And selfishly, it's been good for me and my staff, because me and Tyler came in here as JC coaches. You have to re-recruit your own best freshmen every single year. so that they stay in the program as sophomores. You have to put a premium on development and accept that if it's right, you know, like some players will be leaving at our level, and that's just part of it. And you have to just take the best players and the best personalities you can find and figure it out on the fly, and then try to figure out on the fly what pieces fit those guys and how to hodgepodge it together if you're not going to have continuity. Mm-hmm. And who are the guys that are going to give you continuity at our level? You know, there's like the one-time transfer rule now, which I see guys still transferring 4 times. So I guess I'm just bad from a compliance standpoint, but I think people kill the portal. Well, we love the portal because if a guy transfers here from a Division I or another, Division II, we're kind of married to each other for better or for worse. I like that. So you get a guy, like the portal's tough. It gives kids an out and they can bail out, and it's just part of life now. But the other side of that is, gosh, now a guy has to really be careful, and he'll have different perspective on round 2. Mm-hmm. And he might say something like, St. Martin's gave me a home, and man, like Coach Landon was really more relaxed with the hats on indoors than my previous coach. So, you never know, like those guys get older. I really value having old guys. We have a ton of transfers. We got a ton of old players in our program, and just their maturity and appreciation for life, I think is starting to make college basketball really special. And the last add-on that I'll have, and I think a lot of guys for a lot of years have complained about AAU basketball and summer basketball. Rightfully so. A lot of that stuff is insane. Everything from the, amount that they charge for parking, to some of the adults that are managing kids, to the behavior that you see. I'll say this, well, if you hate it so much, then don't recruit them. Then just go find transfers, and you can still find those high school guys that are coached by their high school coaches. And if you don't find those guys, get back into the junior college level and the portal. And if you hate AAU so much, then don't go to it. Then hang out with your family in July. So there are some opportunities in there that I don't think get recognized when people just complain about how things change. I love basketball. The 90s is like my favorite decade ever for pop culture, sports, music, all of that. But it's just not the 90s anymore. So we have to embrace the good stuff that's going on right now instead of complaining about the bad.
That's a great place to stop, Coach. Love it. Hey, if people want to reach out, where can they get in contact with you?
Like I said, small college guy. So my email's on the website, and I answer my own emails. So I'm not like the Power 5 guys. And then like any modern coach, on Twitter, spending too much time on social media, trying to be cool. But always got time, and I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a cool thing. There's not a lot of coaching podcasts where guys do much else beyond self-promote. I told you the one with Bob Williams was really special for me to hear, but I've listened to basically more guys at my level in Division II, listening to Paul Trevor, listening to Rich, listening to Clink. That stuff's been really good for me. So thanks for providing all of us that platform.
My pleasure.